Hello everyone, today we're going to be adding this little emoji picker to our action text editor. If you click on the little pop-up, it'll give you a big ol' emoji selection. You can choose any of these. Maybe we go with, I don't know, a brain, and it'll just insert it wherever you'd like it. This is fully customizable, comes with its own documentation. So I know emoji pickers are a popular topic, but I also know that extending action text or Trix is something that people have requested quite a bit, so today I thought we would cover this. We'll be using our blog application for this, but really the only thing you need is a rich text area with action text. Everything else you should be able to follow along with just fine. Okay, so I've gone ahead and created a new branch. Now we can go ahead and get started. So there's only really two things you need to know for this. The first is the tool we're going to be using is the PicmoJS pop-up picker, and you can get that with a link in the video description. Basically, all you have to do is go to PicmoJS.com and you'll find the getting started page. Now, the installation isn't applicable for us because we're going to be using Importmaps for this. You can, of course, use NPM or anything else. It's just going to be a little bit different with Importmaps because Rails decided to go with a route that'll make every single piece of documentation invalid. So instead, what we have to do is we have to start by using the Importmaps commands. So we're going to do that. We're just going to type bin/import, then we can hit tab. We then have to use pin to install or unpin to uninstall. In this case, we're going to use pin. And then we just have to pick whatever we're going to be using. In this case, it is the PicmoJS, but we can just type Picmo, and that should go ahead and pin it. Now, the actual picker that we're using here, I don't know why this is the terminology, but there's two different choices. There is a regular picker, but this one doesn't work like a pop-up picker. There's a specific pop-up picker that you need, and that one requires a separate import that I have to find on my other screen real quick. So instead of the previous command that was pin Picmo, we're actually going to be using pin, and it is at Picmo/popup-picker to specifically add the pop-up picker. Now that will also add regular Picmo to your application, but of course it only gets added once. And we can confirm this by coming into config and importmap.rb, which is where our pop-up picker is going to live. If we look inside of here, I'll hit F11, you can see we have Picmo and we also have the at Picmo pop-up picker, which is a tongue twister in and of itself, but that's okay. Now, to actually add this, we have to find a location where we want to use this. In this application's case, we have a post that has rich text, and we also have comments that have rich text as well. I'm going to be adding it just to the post because you don't need to see me add it to every single form in the application. Now this is going to error out because I forgot to start the server, but I'll just go ahead and do that right now. I'll type Rails S to start the server, and then we can take a look at what we actually have to do here. So once we come into the edit page, this is going to be inside of our views, our posts, and our form. Again, fairly standard scaffold stuff. I'm going to hit Control B to hide the side panel. Basically, what we want to do is ignore this because it already has spoilers. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and I've gotten rid of the spoilers and we can actually get started. So all we have is our import maps right here for our imports. You could also use NPM or yarn. Just make sure you add both Picmo and the at Picmo/popup picker. Inside of the form, we need to use a stimulus controller. Now we have a few stimulus controllers in this application, but we're going to be creating a new one from scratch. It's actually pretty simple. We're just going to come in here. We're going to type Rails G stimulus, and then we're going to call this the emoji picker, I guess, can be the name of the controller. It really doesn't matter. We'll go ahead and we'll run this. It thinks I already have this. I'm just going to go ahead and type yes, and then we'll hit Control L and we'll type Rails S to take a look. We'll come over to the Explorer, come into JavaScript. I'm going to delete this classes folder because that's more spoilers. We can come into the controllers, and then we have the emoji picker controller. Now, the first thing I always like to do when I connect a stimulus controller is to do a console.log and log out the word connected. Once we have that, and we can actually do what GitHub Copilot suggested, we'll say connected to the emoji picker. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-I over here to open up my console, and then I'm going to come over to my form, and I'm going to decide where I want to attach this. So in this case, I think adding the actual controller to the form makes the most sense, and then we'll bind it to the individual areas where we need it. So I'm going to hit F11, and then inside of this form, after the post, we're going to type comma, data colon, and then inside of these braces are where we're going to put our data attributes. The first one we need is the controller, which is just going to be the emoji-picker. And the rest of the stuff will bind down here. So we can go ahead and save this. And now if we exit out of full screen, refresh the page, you'll see that we've connected to the emoji picker inside of our console. So that means that this connect method is firing. That's pretty good. Now the next thing to take a look at. I'm actually going to take this and move it over so it is just a half and half because we don't need the Rails console anymore. So what we want to do here is with the PicmoJS, they want a class for a div with a class of picker container. So we're going to just come over here and right above the rich text area, we can just go ahead and add that in. And we'll just use some Ruby code for this. You can, of course, use a regular div if you'd like to, but here I'm just going to use a content tag. We're going to make this a div. It's not going to have any content, so I'll just make it the empty string. Then we need to give it a class. This is the important part. It needs to be a picker container. And then we'll do a data again. And this is where we're going to do something a little bit different. Basically, what we can do is set a target inside of our emoji picker controller that we can then grab as a variable. So what we'll do is we'll just say this is our emoji underscore picker underscore target colon. This is important. This is not a variable name. This is the name of the controller. So we're setting this as a emoji picker controller target, and then we have a value here, and we'll just make this the picker container. This is going to allow us to grab this div by the name of picker container inside of our emoji target controller without doing a document.getElementById or whatever. Once we have this, we can then do something similar. So we're actually going to grab this comma data, copy it, come down to this body right here. We'll just paste it in on the body. This is our rich text area right here. And for our rich text area, instead of a picker container, we just want this to be our Trix editor. Once we have that, we can go ahead and save this form and come into our emoji picker controller. Inside of here, we just need to set a static targets equal to, and this is just some stimulus magic. And the first one we want to grab is this Trix editor. So we'll just copy this. We'll paste it inside of these quotes. We'll do a comma. We'll come back to the form. We'll grab the picker container. Come over here, open up some quotes, and paste in the picker container. We can then come down here into the connect method, and we can just console.log the Trix editor if we would like. So we can say this.Trix editor target to get access to that Trix editor element. If we come over here and refresh, you'll see we have the entire Trix editor right here in a variable. This is just like if we were to do document.getElementById, and then we grab whatever this thing's ID is. If it has one, it does the post body. So if we come into our console, we do document.getElementById, post body, quotes. That will also give us our picker controller, but this way we have a whole bunch of extra stuff that we can throw on there just to make our code a little bit more bloated. Jokes aside, this is just a convenient way to grab it, I guess. So what we can do now, because we have both of these, is we can actually start the setup for the emoji picker. So the first thing we need to do is we need to just initialize, or I guess we just want to grab the actual picker. We're just going to set it right here. We're going to pass in an empty picker into a new class that we're about to make. We're going to call this the rich text. We're going to set this equal to a new rich text object. And then we'll just pass in the picker, and we need to pass in a button. Now we don't have this button yet, so let's just go ahead and create it. I'm going to call this the emoji button. This is literally going to be the button that we add right here that has our little emoji face on it that we click and has the event listener. So to do this, we need two parts of a function. The first one is a button string, which is just going to call a function called this.emojiButtonString. So I broke this up because the first part is just a literal string containing the contents of the button. And I'll just go ahead and copy some of this, and then I'll walk you through the rest. Basically, we have a template string here, and then inside of this, we don't want that. We're just going to create this, and then we're going to return the button string right here, because this is just a long string, and you might want to do this more than once. So I just put it into its own little method to grab it. Now it's only going to have one class, which is the Trix-button. We don't need any others. And then after that, we need to give this an ID. We'll set it equal to emoji-picker. We can then give it a data-Trix-action equal to, and I mean, I don't really know what you want to call this. You could just call it like, I don't know, pop-up picker if you'd like. And then we want to give it a tab index equal to 1. And then finally, we can put in the actual emoji. So we're just going to go ahead and close this. We'll then go ahead and close our button. And then inside of the actual content of the button, we can just paste in an emoji. You'll probably want to just Google one. Basically, I just went to Google and I searched for like a smiley face emoji, and I just grabbed the first one I saw. This is just so we have something inside of our button. This will then get returned to our button or into our button string variable. Then we want to do something similar, but instead we want to actually create the emoji button by calling this.emoji button template. So we come down here, we say this is the emoji button template, which takes in a button string. We then create a DOM parser, and I'm sure there's cleaner ways to do this. Then we use this DOM parser to basically construct this. We start by calling parse from string on the DOM parser. We pass in the button string and we say we want it to be text/HTML. We then grab a query selector for the button, which gives us the actual button itself. And then we can just go ahead and return the emoji button. Once this is done, we can refresh and get an error probably. There it is, because we don't have the rich text. In this case, what I did was I created a new folder inside of our JavaScript, right click, called it classes because I am super uncreative today. And then inside of the classes, I created a rich text.js class. This is sort of going to be the thing that creates our actual emoji button logic. So we start by exporting a class. We call it rich text. We then give this a constructor. And remember, we're passing in the, what did we call it? We're passing in the picker and the emoji button. So we have a picker and we have an emoji button. Then inside of our constructor, we start by setting this.picker equal to the picker. We set this.emoji button equal to the emoji button. And then we call this.create emoji picker button. Because again, I'm feeling super original today. So this is just a function which doesn't take in any arguments. And then inside of here, it just adds a event listener. So we call this.emoji button add event listener. It's going to be for click, and then it's going to call not this.create, it's going to call this.toggle emoji picker.bind, and then we pass in this because it needs a reference to this context. Once we have the actual thing created, and we can of course move this down if we'd like. Maybe we want to put the add event listener on a new line. We can then come down here and we can say, all right, now let's do a document. Let's actually tab this over one. Let's do a document, call .query selector on it. And now we have to pick where in our Trix editor we want to place this button. In my case, I want it to be on this block in the middle here, but basically each one of these blocks has a different thing that we can select. So I'm going to go ahead and move this, and we can sort of take a look. So you have your overall Trix toolbar, and then you have your button row. You want to expand your button row, and then you're going to have a couple different button groups. Basically, you have your Trix button group for the text tools, the block tools, and the file tools. You could also add your own button group if you'd like. Here's like a spacer button group, and here's just your history tools. I'm going to grab the block tools. So you'll notice here it has the double dashes. This is just going to convert to an equals. So the way we're going to do this is inside of our query selector, we're going to open up some quotes. We're going to put in a square bracket. And then in here, we're going to say data-trix-button-group. And then instead of doing the double dash, we just say this is equal to the block-tools group. So that gives us our button group, which is going to be this one right here, which is the block tools right here. So we actually, yeah, we did say block tools. Okay. Once we have that, we can then call .prepend because we want to prepend this button, and we just want to add it to the beginning. So we call prepend, and then we say this.emoji button. Once that's done, we then have our create method in here. Now we need to create our toggle method that we used right here. So we just come down here, toggle picker. We're going to pass in an event, but I don't actually think I use it. And then there is a lovely method with the Picmo pop-up picker that's called toggle. There's also a .open and a .close that you can use if you'd like to use like specific calls to .open and .close. But of course, this will just toggle it to open or close depending on what it is. The last thing we need, because in our emoji picker, we're just passing in an empty picker here, is a way to set the picker. So we'll just create one more function, call it set picker, takes in a picker, says this dot picker is equal to picker. If you think I haven't said picker enough yet, let me know in the comments down below, but I think I can fit it in a couple more times before this tutorial is over. So now we have our rich text. The last step is right here, which is to create the actual picker. We're going to start by setting the picker equal to a create popup call. This is going to take in a couple different arguments, but first we need to actually get access to this picker. So we're going to do a import, and we need to import two things. The first thing is the create popup method, which is going to come from our @Picmo/popup picker. I told you I could fit it in a few more times. And the second thing we need to import is our rich text because we are using it. So it's probably a good idea to import it. And we're going to import this from /classes/rich text. I'm sure there's a way to do a relative import here, but this is just the way that I have it in my spaghetti code. We can then come down here to our create popup, and then we can sort of do whatever it asks us to do in the documentation. The first thing that the Picmo documentation wants from us is for us to set a root element, which is equal to a container with the .picker container class. Now, thankfully, we already have that. So we can just set the root element to be equal to this .picker container, which is up here. But remember, because we have one picker container, we're just going to use the target. So we can say picker container target. This will allow us to just grab it real quick without any other fancy logic. But let's say we had two picker containers. We could just call targets and then grab the 0th one, for example, if we would like. But in this case, because there's only one, we're just going to grab the first one. Once we have this, we now have the root element. The issue is if we come in here and we refresh, everything's going to still blow up because the class name is undefined, whatever that means. Basically, after we do this initial call right here with the root element, which you can do some more customization in here. If you come over to the pop-up or the Picmo website, there's a whole bunch of extra arguments you can pass in. You just really have to go through here and sort of figure out what you like. But there's like themes and stuff as well if you like it. But once you have that, we can then do a comma after this brace right here, and we can open up another one. And this brace is interesting. So there's a couple things you're going to want to pass in here. So the first thing we want to do here is create the actual trigger element. So this is going to be a trigger element, which is going to be our emoji button. Now we do have the rich text, which has the listener to toggle the pop-up, but it also wants a trigger element. So we're going to set that to be the emoji button. It then needs a reference element, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the comment for that as well. And I guess I'm going to collapse the side panel with Control B because this is a lot to take in. And then this is going to be our reference element, which is going to be the emoji button. The reference element is where we are going to sort of position the pop-up picker relative to. So you have a bunch of different options here, but the basic idea is we need to pass in a position, which only works if you have a reference element. And we want the position to be, I guess in this case, we can make it the bottom dash start. There's a whole bunch of different options for this. Like you can even pin it to the top if you would like. But the basic idea is when you click on this and it actually works, you can either position it so it pops up down here, pops up here, to the right of it, or to the left of it. And again, all this stuff is sort of covered in the actual documentation where you can see how all of this works. There's also some other options here, like talking about the toggle or your ability to like hide the pop-up picker if you click on an emoji, so you can only select one. You can also set it to false, I believe, which allows you to select multiple emojis without it closing. But you get the idea. So we have this. Now let's come out here. We can come out of the actual create pop-up because we're done in here. We're not going to be doing any other customization. The final two things we now need to do are a picker.add event listener. We want to add an event listener for the emoji:select event. And then we're going to do a event. We're going to do a arrow, and this is going to go into a this. And for this part, once we select an emoji, this is where we're going to use our Trix editor. So we're going to say this.Trix editor target. And then because of the Trix editor API, which I can actually pull up real quick, if you go to Google and you search for the Basecamp Trix editor, this will take you to the Basecamp GitHub page, which has a whole bunch of information on stuff like how the document model works for the Trix editor. So you can do all sorts of cool stuff in here. You just really have to read through it. It's kind of a dense read, but it is what it is. Once you get through it, you'll see that you can call .editor to get access to the editor, and then you can call .insert string, which will find the position of your cursor. And if you're highlighting something, it'll replace whatever is highlighted, or it'll just insert it at that location if you only have a piece selected. You can then pass in this case, it's saying the event.detail.emoji.native, but I'm just going to do the event.emoji. We'll go ahead and save this. And then we can come over here, we can refresh. And if we click on this, you'll see that it still says undefined for toggle. Now our toggle in here is this this.picker.toggle, which means our picker is undefined. That's because we never use this setPicker method because we're still passing in the empty picker. Again, I told you I'd say it a few more times before we were done here. So the final thing we need to do is call richText.setPicker, pass in the picker, save this, come over here, refresh, click on the emoji, and then we need to come in here and get rid of the S on target because this is a singular target. Come over here, click on the emoji, and now it is sort of working. Okay, and I actually realized that the reason why this was appearing at the top there was because I was zoomed in so far that it was causing it to sort of appear at the top. It looks like now it is appearing at the right spot. So we can go ahead and select an emoji. That'll add in this weird alien thing, or we can highlight some text, like let's say this much, and we'll come in here and we'll look for, I don't know, this one, and you can see it is just inserting the emoji wherever we'd like and overriding what we want. This is of course possible to refactor this down a little bit and make it a little bit cleaner, but you know, this is sort of a good point, and it sort of shows you how to extend the Trix editor in addition to adding just the emoji selector. So hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you got some value out of this, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next one.